The cabin lights hummed softly as the aircraft leveled off through the clouds, a routine sound that usually lulled passengers into a false sense of security. Rows of seats were filled with businessmen tapping on laptops, families whispering to restless children, and solo travelers staring blankly out the windows. Everything looked ordinary, too ordinary. The flight attendant moved down the aisle with a calm smile, pushing a beverage cart, her posture relaxed, her voice gentle, her movements efficient but unremarkable. To everyone on board, she was just another trained professional doing her job at 35,000 feet. No one could have imagined that within minutes, this quiet cabin would become the stage for a life-or-death battle, or that the woman in uniform pouring coffee would soon fly an aircraft like a combat ace forged in chaos and fire. The first sign that something was wrong came not with shouting or gunfire, but with silence. The kind of silence that feels heavy, like the air itself has changed. A man near the back stood up too quickly, knocking his knee into the seat in front of him. Another followed, then another. Their movements were deliberate, coordinated, rehearsed. One of them pulled something metallic from beneath his jacket. The click was soft, but final. A weapon. Panic rippled through the cabin in an instant. Gasps turned into screams, hands reached for loved ones, and the illusion of safety shattered like glass. One hijacker moved toward the cockpit, shouting commands in a thick accent, his voice shaking not with fear but with excitement. Another blocked the aisle, weapon raised, eyes darting, daring anyone to move. Passengers froze. Some cried openly, others stared in disbelief, their minds refusing to accept what was happening. This was supposed to be a short flight. A routine trip, not a nightmare ripped straight from the evening news. The flight attendant stopped her cart and slowly raised her hands, her face composed but alert. She met the hijacker's eyes for a brief moment, long enough to read him, to measure his confidence, his mistakes, his breathing. Then she stepped back, obeying orders like everyone else. To the hijackers, she was invisible. Just another civilian. Just another hostage. What they didn't know was that years earlier, far from this peaceful cabin, she had learned how to survive under fire. She had trained in simulators where alarms screamed non-stop. She had flown through storms that tried to tear wings from fuselages. She had learned to land aircraft with failing engines, damaged controls, and zero margin for error. She had trained with military pilots who believed fear was a tool, not a weakness. She had flown combat missions where one wrong decision meant death. And she had survived all of it. As the hijackers forced their way into the cockpit, one of the pilots resisted. The struggle was brief and brutal. A gunshot echoed through the plane, followed by screams. The cockpit door slammed shut. The plane began a slow, unnatural turn. Seatbelt signs flashed. Oxygen masks rattled in their compartments. People prayed. Some whispered goodbye messages into their phones, unsure if they would ever be heard. In the cabin, the flight attendant moved again, this time with purpose. She knelt beside a crying child, fastening his seatbelt tighter, whispering calm words that somehow cut through the chaos. She checked on an elderly man whose hands shook uncontrollably, pressing his shoulder with reassuring strength. Her calm spread like a quiet resistance against the panic. Passengers noticed. Something about her presence felt different. Stronger. Minutes passed like hours. The plane descended sharply, then leveled out again. The engines changed pitch, straining under unfamiliar commands. Inside the cockpit, the hijackers argued. They weren't pilots. They knew just enough to keep the plane in the air, but not enough to control it safely. Every adjustment made things worse. Warnings blared. Red lights flashed. The aircraft shuddered. Then the unthinkable happened. One of the hijackers panicked. He pulled the wrong control at the wrong time. The plane lurched violently. The artificial horizon spun. The nose dipped dangerously. In a moment of pure terror, the hijacker fired his weapon again. When the smoke cleared, the cockpit fell silent except for alarms. The aircraft was now a massive, uncontrollable missile hurtling through the sky with no one capable of flying it properly. That was when the flight attendant made her move. She unbuckled her seatbelt and stood, ignoring the screams, ignoring the weapons still pointed at passengers. She moved toward the cockpit with steady steps, her hands raised, her face calm. A hijacker shouted at her to stop. She didn't. She spoke instead, her voice firm, cutting through the noise. The plane needs to be stabilized or everyone dies. There was something in her tone that made him hesitate. Authority. Certainty. The kind that couldn't be faked. He lowered his weapon just enough. Just long enough. Inside the cockpit, the scene was chaos. One hijacker lay slumped over the controls. The other stared in horror at the instruments, completely lost. The flight attendant pushed past him and slid into the pilot's seat with practiced ease. Her hands moved instantly, correcting the angle of attack, adjusting thrust, leveling the wings. The aircraft responded like a living thing finally guided by someone who understood it. The alarms quieted. The plane steadied. For the first time since the hijacking began, there was hope. She scanned the instruments, her mind racing through checklists burned into memory from another life. Fuel levels, airspeed, altitude, navigation. She transmitted a mayday call, her voice clear and professional, identifying the aircraft, the situation, and her qualifications. Air traffic control responded immediately, stunned but focused, guiding her through the process. Passengers watched in disbelief as the plane flew smoothly again. Whispers spread. The flight attendant wasn't just helping. She was flying the aircraft. The remaining hijacker realized too late what was happening. He lunged forward, weapon raised. She reacted without hesitation. A sharp maneuver threw him off balance. He slammed into the cockpit wall, the weapon skittering across the floor. She kicked it away, her movements precise, efficient, trained. This was not improvisation. This was muscle memory. With the cockpit secured, she focused on landing. Weather conditions were poor. The nearest airport was crowded. The aircraft had sustained damage. Any mistake could still be fatal. But pressure was nothing new to her. She had landed planes under worse conditions with lives depending on every decision. This was no different. As the runway lights appeared through the clouds, the cabin held its breath. The descent was fast. Too fast. She adjusted, compensating for damaged controls, fighting the aircraft every second. The wheels hit the runway hard, bounced once, then slammed down again. The brakes screamed. The plane shuddered violently before finally coming to a stop. Silence. Then applause erupted, mixed with sobs, laughter, and prayers of gratitude. Passengers embraced strangers. Children cried with relief. Lives had been saved. Emergency crews flooded the runway. Authorities boarded the plane. The flight attendant stood slowly, exhaustion finally washing over her. Only then did she reveal the truth. She wasn't just cabin crew. She was a former military combat pilot who had left service years ago, choosing a quieter life, never imagining her past would one day save hundreds of lives. News outlets called her a miracle, a hero, a legend, but she rejected the spotlight. She said she only did what she was trained to do. And that's the truth about warriors. They don't look like heroes. They don't announce themselves. They wait quietly until the moment arrives. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, if you respect courage, sacrifice, and hidden strength, then make sure you subscribe to our channel Bravo Warrior Stories. Your support helps us bring you more real, intense, and unforgettable stories of bravery from around the world. Stay with us, because the next story might be even more unbelievable than this one.